let's try and start them. So I'm going to talk to you about Google Chrome's developer tools. I'm sure that some of you already use them, and hopefully if you do use them, you might find something in this talk that you've not known before, you've not seen before. I certainly learned quite a lot when I was doing some of the research for this. It's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that, and I didn't know you could do that. So hopefully you'll find something good. And we're going to look at 3 areas essentially. So we're going to look at how you can test your websites at different screen sizes. So if you're building a website and you want to look how it's going to look on tablets and mobiles and various screen sizes, then you can do that. We're going to look at inspecting your web pages to see what's actually in the markup of the page and how you can manipulate that and test things out. And we're going to look at analysing the performance of your web page to see how fast it's loading and what resources are being pulled in, etc. So we'll start off with testing the different sizes and screen sizes. So if you're building, which you should be, building responsive web pages, obviously you should be looking at how they respond on the different sizes of screen, whether it be on a phone, a tablet, a laptop, a desktop, a projector, a TV, whatever it might be displayed on. Therefore, you should be checking that. And Google Chrome's tools can obviously help us with that. Now, if you've not ever accessed the developer tools in Chrome, and I'm using Chrome as an example because it's really good, but all browsers have something like this installed. So Safari has the same. I think Internet Explorer, dare I say, might have something to do with that. Firefox, certainly. Firefox was kind of the one that started it all off, I guess, wasn't it, with inspectors and stuff. So with, what's it called, Firebug, which has been recently retired, I think, hasn't it? So to get to there's plenty of ways you can get to the inspector tools. I believe if you go to View and Developer, you can do it from here. So these are the developer tools that we're going to look at today. You can also obviously use the shortcode, which on a Mac was on there somewhere. Where's it gone? Which is that little shortcode, which is Control, is it, or Option, Command, and I. Or you can just right-click on the page and then choose Inspect, and it will show you the inspector. Now, I dock my inspector to the right-hand side because I find that's easiest to work with, but you can, usually by default, it will appear at the bottom of the screen as a panel at the bottom. And I believe if you click on these little dots up here, you can, oh no, where is it that you can change those ones? There it is. You can dock it in any position you want. So you could have it on the left, you could have it floating on the screen, so you could move it around. You could have it at the bottom or the right. I just find the right, it works quite nicely, but it's entirely up to you as to where you think it's most appropriate for you. I'm just going to...
That's it. That's all I've done. Inspect.
I'm just going to move these panels just a little bit so we can kind of see what's happening in them. In fact, can I make it any wider without it getting a bit ridiculous? No, it's not good. We'll go a bit narrower. Okay. So, sorry, my notes are on my iPad and it keeps going off. So that's how to access developer tools. So let's have a look at what's going on here. So in this top panel on the right-hand side here, this is kind of all of the markup, all of the source code that makes up this page. It's all the HTML that writes the content of this page. So your browser looks at all this code here and it basically draws this web page for you. That's how it kind of works. So as you can see, as I hover over things, you can see that on the left-hand side, it's telling me which bits of the website they are. Okay, so if I scroll down here, we can highlight something like that. That's all of that bit. I can then expand these and look at individual bits of this. And I can keep going down. It's like a tree of different things, so you can see the different bits and bobs. You see there's lots of stuff on here. I'm trying to find that. But the good thing is, if you want to find a bit that's on the page, I can literally just say I want to look at what this title is and what it looks like in the inspector. I can just right-click, Inspect, and it will take me straight to that particular part of the code. So I can easily find that. So that's how to look at where things are. I'll come back to more about that in the second part of the talk, which is inspecting the web pages. But we're going to look at like responsive style viewing. So I don't know if you noticed, there's a little button here that says Toggle Device Toolbar. It's a little bit small on the screen. But if I press that, it turns me into what's called the Dev Responsive mode, and it allows me to test the web page I'm looking at different screen sizes. So you might have noticed I've got these little handles now on the side here, and I can start to move the size of the page left and right. I can also move the height of the page as well, so I can change it so it's up and down. So as you can see, the BBC News is a fully responsive web page, and as I start moving things around, it starts to change the way it looks, so it's optimized for the different device or screen size you're looking at. Now at the top, I'm looking at this in what's called a responsive setting, and it's telling me the device or the viewport width and height in here, and as I move this here, you'll see that changes. So the width changes, and if I did the height, it would. I'm looking at it at 100% because it fits in the viewport. And I'll show you about this in a second. And this is the orientation of it, but we'll use that when we come to phones and stuff in a second. So it also has, if we drop down this list, we can actually look at this in terms of some other popular devices. So we can have a look at it, what the thing might look like. So I have an iPhone 6, so let's have a look what it might look like on an iPhone 6. So it might look something like that. Now, just a warning here, this is not going to be an exact representation of what it looks like on your device, because I'm still looking at this in Google Chrome. I'm not looking at it on an iPhone. So your iPhone in Safari, whatever it uses, it might render some elements slightly differently. So you might get like inputs for things looking slightly different, but it gives you a good idea of where things are going to sit on the page in a responsive view. So it's a decent attempt at making it so it's looking okay. And you can see how it works. Now you can see, because this is a touch device, I'm going to do this with trackpad, so it probably won't work. But I should be able to click and hold and scroll, just like I would on a phone. So I'll put my finger on it and then I'm going up and down. It's a bit harder with a touch device, with a trackpad. Excuse me. Some breaking news there. Facebook now believes 87 million users had information. Oh dear. So that's that device. And then what I can do is I can flip that round using the orientation button. So I can then rotate that into landscape to see what it looked like in the landscape mode, and so on. And then I can change the device. So we can say, what about an iPad? Let's look that way. Notice when I go onto an iPad, it changes the zoom level, because if I had it at 100%, I can't see it. So Google Chrome sort of says, well, hang on, I can't see that. I'll just give you a better zoom value. And then I could flip that round as well, and so on.
The iPad being...
Yep, you can do the same, yeah. So that's the rotation button. So that'll be in portrait, that'll be in landscape. Right. And you can see that the look changes. So here we've got sort of 3 columns, and then we've got 4 columns on an iPad. So you can kind of see how it's going to render on those different screen sizes, which is quite handy. You can turn this device frame off if you like. So this is giving you a little picture of the iPad in the background. I'm just going to flip back to the phone because it's slightly bigger. I think some of these don't have a picture as well. I don't know, like a Galaxy S5. Yeah, a Galaxy S5, they haven't got a picture of that in Google Chrome, so obviously it doesn't show you that one. But they've got the popular ones on. You can turn that off if you want, which I believe is up here. And you can say hide device frame, and that will disappear. But it's really good if you want to take like a little screenshot to show your client what it's going to look like on a phone. And again, just with the caveat that it's not, completely perfect, but it's a good idea of what we're going to see. And all this lot still works on the page, so you can still see what you're looking at on the device and so on. So that's how that works. You can see what it says online here. Let's say I wanted to do a quick test and I wanted to see, well, hang on, if I'm on a phone, someone might be looking at this on a really sort of poor network, maybe a 3G network or something even less than that. So what can we do? So what we could do is we could say, well, actually, what happens when it's offline? Does it actually do anything? Does it work offline? Probably not. It's a web page, unless you've got some fancy system on. What about a low-end mobile phone? So like a low-end bandwidth that's going to be a really dodgy connection. And then you could refresh your page. I'm actually on a phone connection anyway here, so it's probably a bit of a skewed thing. But you can see it's taking longer because Chrome's like slowing it all down to do the same sort of speed that the phone connection would be on. And it's kind of reloading the page. Still hasn't loaded yet, you can see. Still getting images coming in. So it's kind of throttling it back to say, well, this is what would happen if your phone was on that. Oops. Or we could choose like a mid-mobile tier. I'm going to refresh that. It should hopefully be a bit faster. Maybe that's like a 3G connection as opposed to a non-3G connection. Or maybe a 4G connection, I don't know. As I said, I'm going through a phone here, so it's probably skewed anyway. And then we'll put it back to normal, so just online. That's kind of using whatever bandwidth we've got available. So that's quite handy as well. Excuse me. So that's kind of device testing and looking at different screen sizes. You can play around to your heart's content at what screen sizes your website's going to look at and so on. And it's quite handy. And if you've not obviously looking at your sites on different sizes, then do have a look at your own site and see what happens when it's on this size, and does it work or not, or does things sort of splay off the side or whatever. So that's worth looking at. So the next section is obviously inspecting our pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this device toolbar off, if you like. So we're going to go back to looking at the normal page in Chrome that we're looking at. And we can obviously do some stuff with this page. So we can manipulate any part of this page by using the elements of the page on the right-hand side. Before I do that though, I want to just explain the difference from two things. So if I right click on this, I can view what we call the page source. So if I click on the page source, now this is the actual content of the web page, the HTML that gets sent from the server. So as soon as you ask for a page, your server sends you the HTML and then your browser reads this and draws your web page from it. So this is the actual raw stuff that comes from the server. What you actually see in this element inspector here is not necessarily the same as what comes from the server. For example, you might have some JavaScript that's changing objects on this page, for example. So that you might get a different stuff in here to what you get on here. So it's sometimes worth looking at the two, saying, you know, what's going on here? Have I got something wrong? I can see what's actually coming from the server as to what the actual page content is. And you can see it's quite a big page. That's just the home page of Google, of BBC News. Okay, so we can get in here and we can start having a look at what we can do. So as I've mentioned, as you move over the elements in this, and it's just like a big tree, so each one can expand and you can see stuff inside it. That happens to be a script tag. And I can right click on anything and it'll take me to that part of the code. So if we go into inspect, you can see that this particular span class here is controlling that little link there, which is that little audio clip, I think it is. And what you can do is you can manipulate all these things. So let's just go back to this top section and inspect this bit. So we can see this is an A class, it's an A tag, it's an anchor tag, which is obviously a link. And what we can do is we can look at the different elements of this. So you can see it's got several classes on it. And you can see these are the CSS properties that have been applied to this particular element. So we've got position static, and I can turn these on and off. So I could turn off position static, doesn't seem to do anything. I could turn off the font size, doesn't seem to do anything. Oops, turn off that one. Turn everything on and off. There you go, line height does something. And so you can see how these rules in CSS are actually controlling the way that this page, this looks. A lot of these won't do anything about, but you can see anyway. And we could add other ones in here. So if I click in here, I could add a new rule. So I could say like colour red. Again, I might not do anything because it might be overridden by something else. And I can start adding my own CSS rules. And I can see what the thing's going to look like in terms of if I add different things. I could add an element style, which is like an inline style on the page. So I could say, I'll probably do that now if I do colour red. Well, it doesn't, anyway, there you go. But you can add all these and you can turn them on and off as such.
So you add text. You add text to it.
Yep, you can add text to it. I'll come to that in a sec. What's the good things though is if I've clicked on an element like this one, let's try that one. That'd be better on. Like this one. If I click on this little button that says CLS here, I can see these are all the classes that are applied to that particular element. You can see them listed here. So we've got GSC promo body, and that's in here, GSC promo body. And I can easily toggle these on and off. So I can say, if I toggle that off, what happens? So that's doing something about putting it into that box properly. Okay, then we've got that one there. Doesn't appear to do much. And obviously, the reason why some of these might not do anything is because at this screen size, they don't do anything. But they might do something at a different screen size. So I can do that. I can also add new classes. So if I want to do something else with this box, for example, I want to add like a background colour to it, I can create a class for it, add it on here, and then check what it looks like before I actually go ahead and commit to it. So you could add a different class, you know, like class sample, hit enter, and it'll apply that class to it. You can see it up here, class sample in here, so it's been applied. It doesn't do anything because I haven't actually got a rule for that class. And then I can toggle that one on and off, so on and so on in here. So it's really quite handy to do that. What you can also do is, there's a little one that says the element state here. It's given a little hover symbol. So here I can see what happens to this particular element if I am hovering over it, or it's active, it's in focus. So if I hover over it, what happens? Nothing. I bet if I do it with that one, it will underline it. There you go. So that's mimicking what would happen when I hover. So if I hover my mouse, you can see it goes blue and underlines, and I can force that to happen by pressing this button. And then I can inspect what the style is for that, looking down here. So there'll be a hover style down here that I can look at. So that's quite handy. Adrian, isn't it? Sorry, I can't remember your name then. He mentioned about changing the text in here. So in here, there'll be a heading. There it is, H3. And it looks like that this is where the text is. So Russian bid for joint spy probe rejected. I can just delete that, and it's gone. So I can get rid of it and see what it looks like with no heading. Or I could, if it's something that I want to check whether, I do this quite a lot, where it's like, I've developed this particular piece of text or this style, and I want to see, well, what happens if I put like a really, really long headline in it? Is it going to actually work? Is it going to work on the page? So you could have a sample headline that is really, can't spell really, can't type and talk, that's a problem. And then that'll display on your page. So you can see, that, okay, that's going to look fine at that length. So what happens if I get it a bit longer? And then you might see it breaks at a specific point, and then you'll have to do something else to fix it. So you can manipulate the text that's on the page as well. None of this is being saved or anything. This is just happening in my browser at this point in time. So if I refresh this page, it'll just come back to how it was. That's all that's going to happen. But it's allowing me just to test things out, that's all.
You could record your screen and send it out and make it look like it's a real BBC News article.
Exactly. So that's why you should never trust a screen grab off the web, because we can just put whatever we want in. So, you know, you could go to a certain president's Twitter account and just create your own tweets and then put them on Facebook, and everyone would think he's tweeting them, but he hasn't, obviously. So, you know, there's that problem. So just be aware, obviously. Anyone can manipulate a web page. It's not happening in real time, but it can be happening just like we're doing at the moment. Yeah. I can completely remove elements. So if I right-click on this heading class here, I can hide it somewhere. I should look at my screen really rather than the projector. I can hide it, so it just disappears. Now you notice what that does is it kind of keeps its space within the page, but it gets hidden. But what I could also do is I could just say, well, what happens if I delete it, and just get rid of it? So that's what happens if it's not there anymore. And I think undo works, Command and Z, so if you want to get it back again, you can do. Although it doesn't seem to want to put the content back. I'll just refresh, and then we get start again. That's it. So you can see none of those changes have been saved back to the page. Oh, I've gone into that article, that's why it looks different. Back. Okay. So we've done that setting states. So that's kind of how you can manipulate the content of your page. You can use this inspector to find elements of your page. And a lot of the things I use this stuff for is that client comes and says, we want to change the title colour of these from black to red. So you're thinking, well, I wonder which CSS rule does that? There's so many of them. So what you can do is right-click and inspect. You can sort of click on this, and you can start to find which class, what's outputting the colour of that, or what's the font size outputting, it's kind of here. And then you can think, all right, I know what it's this one. It's on, you can see it as well, it's on enhanced.css, and it's on line 1. The reason why it's on line 1 and everything's on line 1 is because this will be a minified CSS file, so everything will just be on one line. But usually it tells you what line it's on, and you can go and find it and then make the change. It's really good for finding things like that. Kind of want to read that now. Anyway. So that is using this to manipulate the code, if you like, and to manipulate things. And then the last part is using what we call the network tab to monitor sort of the speed and performance of your web page. So up at the top here, you'll see there's a network tab. I'm actually just going to go, have we got any content on this site? No, we haven't. Let's use this one then. It's just that there might be loads of resources on this one. So you can see in here, let me just refresh. And also, just out of interest, usually, it depends on your settings, but if you've got the console open, Chrome won't cache anything. So you should be getting like a live view of resources, if you like. There is a setting for that, so I can't remember whether you need to turn it on or whether it's on by default. It's up here somewhere, but because I've got such a tiny screen, I don't think I can see it. There it is. So I've got ticked here, disable cache. So anytime I've got this panel open, it won't have cached any resources. So if you're testing a change you've just made, you've changed an image and you want to go back to the page and refresh it and so on, sometimes it won't show it because Google's cached the image and it won't show it, or Google's cached the CSS file that you've used. So it's kind of handy to have that setting turned on and then it doesn't cache things. I think it's on by default, I might be wrong, but anyway. So when I've got this open, it won't cache the stuff. But also you can do, once you've got the panel open, you can right click on the refresh button and you can do like a normal reload, which won't destroy the cache. You can do a hard reload, which I'm not sure what the difference is. And you can do an empty the cache, so I always do the bottom one. Clear everything, let's start again and get the full content. So when I've done that, you can see what's happening on the right-hand side over here. we're getting this like list of things that have been loaded from the site. So let me just expand this a little bit, then we can see it. So these are all the resources that this web page has called. So as the page loads, it comes across a CSS file, and then it goes and loads that CSS file. It comes across a JavaScript file, it goes and loads the JavaScript file. It finds an image, such as this image at the top here. It goes and loads the image into the page from the URL. And these are the list of resources that's all been requested from this page. So you can see the name, which is the first column. You can see the status of that. So that's when it was requested from the server, what did the server respond with? So the server in this case responded with a 200 message, which is okay, which means, yep, fine, you can have this resource. It might respond with a 404 message, which says, hang on, I don't have this resource, I can't give it you. And that's when it would not load. It might be all sorts of other messages. A 500 error will be like a server error that's just a generic, something went wrong, and so on. It gives you the protocol that it was loaded with. Ooh, that's interesting. The BBC webpage doesn't load over HTTP2. Anyway, so this is loading over a protocol called HTTP 1.1, which is kind of your standard HTTP protocol that web pages load off. Although this resource here was loaded using HTTP 2, which is the newer version of HTTP, which is quite handy. So you can tell what things are loading by. So if you're trying to get your web page to load in HTTP 2, which is the new version, you can tell whether it actually is doing that by looking at what this request was here. You can tell what type of resource it was. So if I expand that, can I expand that? No, it doesn't seem to want to let me. Anyway, you tell what type it is. So is it a document, is it a style sheet, is it a JavaScript file, is it an image, whatever. And then you can see which particular resource actually requested that. So on this example, it's this URL of this article that I'm looking at. That's the article that requested this particular file. It might not be that. It might be something on the page, like a JavaScript file was loaded up, and then the JavaScript file loaded something else up, and you could see where the path was back to what loaded what, basically, which is sometimes interesting. You can see its size, so how big was the actual thing happening, and then you've got this interesting thing on the right-hand side called the waterfall. So this is when things were loaded and how fast they took. So if I scroll down this list, you can see towards the bottom some things load in different times. So this loaded at this point in time. So this is the left-hand side of this thing is when I pressed refresh. The right-hand side of this is when everything got loaded, fully completed. So you can see these resources started to load not right at the start, but afterwards. If I hover over it, you can get some more information about it. So you can see the request for this resource was sent 0.41 milliseconds after I pressed refresh, after the page started to load. So it waited 0.41 milliseconds before it started to load this resource. This thing here called waiting TTFB, TTFB stands for time to first byte. So basically, when you request a resource from the server, you do a little handshake with the server and you say, can I have this resource please? And then you're waiting for the server to respond. And that's what time to first byte is. It's the time that the server said, yep, I'm here, and I'll have that resource, I've got it for you. So sometimes if you've got a slow website, I've seen sites where the time to first byte is huge. And it's like they're doing all these things on the website, they're caching everything and so on. But actually the biggest problem is that the server is just really slow at responding. So it doesn't matter what you do really, unless you fix the server saying, hello quicker, that's what's going to fix your website. In this instance, the waiting time was 213.54 milliseconds, which I wouldn't have thought it's too bad. And then it took 0.57 milliseconds to actually download that resource. And you can see that all in that data. You can also use these headings to reorder things. So for example, let's have a look. What's the biggest thing on this page? Let's imagine it was a slow page and I want to optimize it. If I click on the size thing here, I wish this thing will stop popping up. You can see that, no, it's doing the opposite way around. Let's do it downwards. So this file here, all.js, is the biggest thing on this page. And it's 80.7 kilobytes. So if you were looking at optimizing your page, you could look here for the biggest things that are causing the biggest impact on your page and see whether you can do anything about those. So maybe that file's not minified and it's loading it without being minified and getting all the white space out of it. You could say something there. Maybe that file's not being compressed by the server when it's sent, and it could be you could shave a few kilobytes off it in that way, and so on. What you can also do is you can use these tabs at the top here to filter by the file type. So you can say, well, let's just show me all the JavaScript files on this page. So you can see it's got all these JavaScript files. And again, maybe that's something else we could do. Let's try and put these into 1 or 2 files rather than having so many files, if that's possible. You can see all the CSS files, slightly less than those, but all those files are loaded when this page loads. And we can see all the images. And again, we can order things by size, we can order things by protocol, status, name, anything we like. So we can see the biggest image on this page is 34.8 kilobytes. If I click on it, it'll give me a little preview which one it is. So that's the biggest image at the top. You can also look at what data came back from the server when that was requested, if you're getting really geeky. So you can see the status code was a 2 or a 200. You can even see what the address of the server that it comes from is, the IP address. Whether that's useful to you or not, I don't know. But there's all sorts of information. I'm not going to go into all that because it can get really complicated. But there's all sorts of stuff you can use for debugging purposes. If you're doing stuff with forms and submitting things, that's quite handy to kind of look in it because you can see what was sent and what was received and so on, which is quite handy. So that's kind of that section as to how you can look at the size of things that are loading. Another thing you can see here is that we've got, let's just go back to the All tab, and I'll just do another refresh to start it again. So you can see at the bottom here, it's counting the number of requests that this page makes. So really, we want to keep that as low as possible. The more we request, then the longer it's going to take to load, and the slower it's going to be in essence. So this is requesting 95.6, keeps going up, resources. I think that's because it's using responsive images and things that are happening once the page is loaded. And you can see the total size. So it transferred 576 kilobytes to load this page, which is pretty small, so that's not bad. And it finished in, it's slightly skewed is this because again it's loading stuff once the page is actually loaded, but it's finished in 33 seconds, which is a bit skewed. Let's just load it again and see what happens with the actual load. So you can see it's kind of like loaded now really, it's kind of 3 seconds. This is the actual one. So that's that one. And then it tells you how long the content was like loaded. So the DOM content was loaded in 1 second, just over a second. And the whole page load was done in 2.44 seconds. It's probably a bad page to use as the news because it's got lots of interactive things that happen in the background, which is why these keep changing. Here. You can search in here as well. So if you want to search for something with a specific class, if you just do Command and F, I presume Windows is Control and F, you get a search box in here. So you're not searching on this page here, because this page won't find, if you search in here, it won't find things that like class names. It's only looking for the content inside the HTML elements. But in here, you can search for all the classes. So if I search for direction in here, it should come up. There you go. There's like a JavaScript thing happening in here. There was a class somewhere. There you go. Class on there. So if you're trying to search for a class and an element that's doing something. So we were doing that before when we were looking at your problem. I was trying to search for different things in the inspector to try and find where it was in the site, and then we could go about actually changing it. So that was quite handy. So that's that one. Some other things that you might not have seen is that, let's just go back into the device thing. I'll just make that a little bit smaller so we can see. We'll do like, we'll do it on here. So you can see this is this page and it's quite long. So you've got all this stuff. You can see how these lazy loaded. So they've just loaded in now, scroll down. What you can do on here is you can take a screenshot, which is quite handy. So you can capture a screenshot by clicking this button of the actual screen that I'm looking at. So it would capture this sort of viewing area here up to the bottom. But you can also do a full size screenshot. So this, if I press this, it'll capture the entire, it'll scroll down and capture the entire thing. So you can, again, it could be handy for setting to clients. Sorry, say again.
You mean including the code?
No, it would just capture the visible part of the screen. Right. Yeah. So if I do, I don't know, let's do it and see what happens. So you can see Chrome starts to scroll the page and do something, and then it's downloaded. Wow, it's huge. But obviously you can then, you can take that right back here and get rid of it and so on and make it nice and wide to do a screenshot. There are browser plugins you can get for doing this stuff, of course, but it's just quite handy to do if you wanted to look at that. That's kind of all I had on my list, really, stuff to look at. But yeah, if you've not had a play with them and looked at pages and see what they do, then certainly it's the first place I go when someone says I've got a problem with a page. The console is the one I haven't mentioned, which is this box down at the bottom. If that isn't displaying, it'll be displayed like that, so you just need to click the little... So anyway, if you just click that thing and click Show Console Drawer, and this will tell you of like any... you can actually do loads in here, I'm not going to go through what you can do, but it'll tell you of any errors and things that happen on the page. So we were looking before on the web page and there was some 404s of things that weren't working. It also had some mixed content warnings. That meant the page was loading over HTTPS, but it was requesting resources that weren't HTTPS. And we could see what they were in here and we could debug things. That's quite handy. You can also run JavaScript in here if you wanted to. If you're a developer, you can type JavaScript and start running it into hams. I've done that quite handily. So sometimes I've had a page delivered to me. It's got like an unordered list of like people's names. Maybe it's like attendees for a session. You think, I wonder how many there are coming to this session, and you want to count them. Well, you could just do a little piece of JavaScript that says, count me all the classes that do this, enter, and it come like, oh, 83. There you go. That's quite handy. And you can do other things in it, but yeah, that's the console.